Imagine being alone in the Wild West, facing danger at every turn, when a stranger suddenly appears and says, "You need a man like me." What would you do? Today we follow the story of a fearless Apache woman and the cowboy who changes her life forever. Hit subscribe, like this video, and comment your thoughts, because this story is full of courage, danger, and unexpected twists. Let's dive into the Wild West and see how their journey unfolds. Let's get started. The cold wind cut through the canyons like a knife, carrying the dry scent of sagebrush and dust. A lone rider moved steadily along the rocky trail, his horse's hooves striking sparks against the stones. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore the kind of calm confidence only earned by surviving countless battles in the Wild West. His steel-blue eyes scanned the horizon, alert to every movement. He had heard whispers of trouble in this region, of lawlessness, of danger lurking behind every bluff. Yet nothing could prepare him for the figure he saw struggling against the wind in the distance. The figure became clearer as he approached, a woman, her dark hair whipping around her face, her eyes wide with defiance and fear. She was unmistakably Apache, her clothing rugged yet elegant, marked by her people's traditions. Her stance was guarded, ready for either confrontation or escape. He dismounted, brushing the dust from his coat, and studied her carefully. There was no hesitation in her movements, no panic. She carried herself like someone who had fought for every step she had taken in life, someone who had survived where many others would have perished. He called out softly, his voice carrying over the wind without startling her. "Name's Jake," he said, tipping his hat, "and you look like someone who doesn't need saving, yet here you are alone in the wild." Her eyes flicked toward him, sharp and suspicious. "I am Nijoni," she replied, her voice steady, "and I survived just fine on my own." Her gaze measured him, testing whether his confidence was genuine or a mask hiding some hidden danger. Jake smiled faintly, understanding the caution born of years of hardship. "Maybe you do," he said, taking a careful step closer, "but even the strongest sometimes need someone to watch their back. The world doesn't always care about honor or pride. It just wants to see you fall." Nijoni's eyes narrowed, her hand brushing against the edge of her knife. She had been taught to trust her instincts above all else, and yet there was something about this man, something in the steady calm of his posture, that made her pause. He was not the kind to attack without cause. The wind carried the distant sounds of wildlife and the faint echo of water from a nearby stream. Jake studied her face, noting the strength in her jaw, the determination in her eyes, and the unspoken weight she carried. "You need a man like me," he said quietly, almost as a statement of fact rather than an offer. Nijoni froze, the words hitting her unexpectedly. She had never been one to rely on anyone, but there was a strange, undeniable truth in his tone. She had survived, yes, but survival was not the same as thriving, and the wilderness was harsh beyond measure. "Why should I trust you?" she asked, her voice controlled but tinged with curiosity. Trust was a rare currency in her life. She had seen strangers come and go, some offering help, others seeking to exploit her. Jake's expression softened, showing neither arrogance nor condescension. "Because I've been where you are," he said. "I've faced storms alone, lost people I loved, and made mistakes I still pay for. I know the world is cruel, and I know how to survive it. If you let me, I can teach you to fight it with me by your side." The sun broke fully over the horizon, warming the canyon floor with its pale golden light. Nijoni studied him, weighing her instincts against the strange pull she felt toward him. There was danger in trusting, yes, but there was also possibility. She had spent years relying solely on herself, yet there was a part of her that wondered if survival might be sweeter with someone who understood, someone who could meet her strength with his own. Jake's gaze did not waver. There was honesty in his eyes, a silent promise that he would not take advantage of her. For a long moment, silence hung between them, the only sound the wind and the occasional cry of a hawk circling overhead. Nijoni's shoulders relaxed slightly, and her hand dropped from her knife. "And if I refuse?" she asked, testing him. Jake shrugged, a casual motion that belied the seriousness of his words. "Then I ride on, but I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't worry about you." There was a quiet sincerity in his voice that made her reconsider. It was not a challenge or a demand. It was a choice offered without force. Nijoni took a deep breath, letting the canyon air fill her lungs, feeling the tension leave her body just enough to consider his offer. "I don't know if I can trust anyone," she admitted, her voice barely audible. Trust had been costly before, and betrayal had left scars she carried every day. Yet there was something different about him, a calm that suggested he had faced the same world she had, survived, and come through stronger. Jake nodded, as if he understood the weight of her words. "Trust is earned, not given," he replied, "but I'll prove it if you let me." They began to walk together along the trail, their movements cautious but synchronized, each aware of the other's presence. Jake shared stories of the paths he had ridden, of dangers he had faced, and of lessons learned in the unforgiving expanse of the West. Nijoni listened, her eyes scanning the horizon while her mind absorbed every word. She began to notice small details, the way he watched for movement, the way he adjusted his pace to keep her safe, the way he carried himself without arrogance but with undeniable skill. As the day wore on, they came across a small stream, its clear waters cutting through the dusty earth like a ribbon of life. Jake dismounted first, offering his hand to help Nijoni navigate the rocks. Her fingers brushed his, and though she pulled back quickly, a small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. There was a rhythm forming between them, an unspoken understanding that neither had anticipated but both felt. Survival alone had been her rule, yet now, the idea of partnership, even tentative, seemed not entirely unwelcome. Evening approached, and shadows stretched long across the canyon floor. They made camp beneath the rocky overhang, lighting a small fire to keep the chill at bay. Nijoni sat across from Jake, her eyes reflecting the flames as she considered the day. "You're not like the others," she said quietly. "Most men I've met would have tried to take advantage of me, or worse." Jake's gaze met hers, unwavering. "And most men you meet haven't faced what we have. I'm not like most men, and I don't intend to be." There was a truth in his words that resonated with her, a promise that went beyond protection. It was respect. The fire crackled between them, warming more than just their bodies. Words gave way to silence, and in that quiet, Nijoni realized she felt safer than she had in years. The world outside the canyon might still be harsh and unyielding, but in this moment, with this man who spoke plainly and acted with integrity, there was a possibility of something new, not dependence, but partnership, not weakness, but strength shared. The night deepened, and the stars above shone brightly, witnesses to the unlikely bond forming in the heart of the Wild West. The night deepened around the canyon, the fire crackling softly between them as shadows danced along the rocks. Nijoni's mind replayed the day's events, the unexpected arrival of Jake, his quiet confidence, and the strange pull she felt toward him despite her lifelong independence. She had survived harsh winters, hostile strangers, and the unforgiving wilderness, yet there was something different about this cowboy. He did not rush her, he did not judge, and he seemed to see her not as a fragile woman, but as an equal, a warrior in her own right, navigating a world that had tried to break her. Morning came with a pale light creeping over the canyon walls. Jake had already started gathering firewood and preparing their sparse breakfast. Nijoni watched quietly, noting how methodical and precise he was, how each action seemed calculated to protect both of them. When he turned and offered her a piece of dried meat and some water, she hesitated, then accepted. "You're sure you can handle this trail?" he asked, eyes searching hers. She nodded, but the slightest curve of her lips betrayed her amusement. "And you think you can handle me?" His grin widened, showing the easy charm that had drawn her curiosity in the first place. Their journey resumed along a winding path that clung to the canyon's edge. The sun climbed high, and the wind carried the scent of distant pine and wildflowers, a rare reprieve in such harsh terrain. Jake led with quiet confidence, scouting ahead and checking for any signs of danger. Nijoni kept close, her eyes alert, hands brushing against the hilt of her knife when necessary. Despite her natural caution, there was a growing sense of trust forming. Each small action, each gesture, reinforced the unspoken understanding that they would face whatever came together, rather than alone. By midday they reached a dry riverbed, its rocky surface reflecting the glaring sun. Jake motioned for a rest, and Nijoni carefully dropped to the stones, letting out a breath she hadn't realized she had been holding. "You're faster than I thought," she said, a hint of admiration in her voice. Jake chuckled, shaking his head. "Years of chasing trouble, learning to survive. You can't outrun the land, you have to respect it." She studied him quietly, noting the sincerity in his words. In him she saw not just a survivor, but a man shaped by hardship, who understood the fragile balance between strength and wisdom. The stillness of the riverbed was broken by a sudden noise, a rustle in the bushes, followed by the unmistakable sound of movement. Jake's hand went to his rifle instinctively, and Najoni's posture tensed. Out from the underbrush emerged a group of outlaws, eyes glinting with malice, weapons drawn. "Well, what do we have here?" one of them sneered, stepping forward. Jake's voice was calm but commanding. "I suggest you leave. You're not welcome here." Najoni's heart pounded, but she stood her ground, knowing that retreat was not always the wisest choice. A tense standoff ensued, each side measuring the other. The outlaws were ruthless, and their intentions were clear. They had preyed on travelers before. Jake's steady hands, sharp eyes, and knowledge of the terrain gave him the upper hand, but the odds were still dangerous. Najoni, reading the situation, moved with calculated precision, positioning herself where she could defend and strike if necessary. Together, their unspoken coordination created a formidable front. The outlaws hesitated, sensing that this would not be an easy victory. A sudden shot rang out, followed by a flurry of activity. Jake's aim was precise, taking down one outlaw with a single shot, while Najoni struck another with a swift, expert movement of her knife. The remaining men faltered, panic setting in as they realized their prey was not defenseless. Within moments, the confrontation ended, the outlaws retreating into the canyon, nursing their wounds and their pride. Najoni exhaled, heart racing, realizing the danger they had just survived together. Jake gave her a faint smile, as if acknowledging her skill and bravery without the need for words. They continued along the canyon trail, the tension gradually giving way to a quiet understanding. The near-death encounter had forged a bond neither had expected, a silent acknowledgement of mutual reliance. Najoni found herself observing Jake in a new light, the way he handled danger, the quiet confidence that had once seemed arrogant, and the protective instinct that matched her own fierce independence. She realized that trust could be earned, not demanded, and perhaps, in him, she had found someone worthy of that trust. As the sun began to dip behind the canyon walls, they discovered a secluded cave, hidden from the path and perfect for shelter. Jake set up a small fire, while Najoni explored the cave, noting its natural formations and potential defensive positions. Night fell quickly in the desert, and with it came a sense of safety they both cherished. They sat near the fire, sharing sparse food and water, and a quiet conversation that revealed fragments of their lives. Stories of hardship, loss, and survival flowed naturally, creating a sense of intimacy that neither had expected nor sought. By midnight the fire had burned low, casting flickering shadows across the cave walls. Najoni looked at Jake, her thoughts a mixture of admiration, caution, and something new, a growing warmth she had long denied herself. "You've taught me more today than anyone ever has," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake's eyes met hers, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. "And you've reminded me why some things are worth fighting for," he replied. There was no grand declaration, no rush, just the quiet understanding that their partnership had evolved into something far deeper. The following days were filled with travel, survival, and the gradual blending of their skills and instincts. Together, they navigated treacherous terrain, hunted for food, and defended against occasional threats. Each challenge reinforced their trust and respect, and slowly, a bond formed that went beyond mere survival. Najoni found herself relying on Jake's knowledge, his patience, and his unwavering presence. Jake, in turn, learned to admire her courage, her sharp mind, and her ability to thrive in a world that had tested her at every turn. By the time they reached the edge of the canyon where the trail led back to the main settlements, Najoni and Jake had become inseparable partners, not through force, but through shared experience and respect. She looked at him, a mixture of gratitude and something more, realizing that the man she had first met with suspicion had become someone she could trust with her life. "You were right," she admitted softly. "I did need someone like you." Jake tipped his hat, a grin on his face, yet his eyes reflected the quiet pride of a man who had earned a bond rare in the harshness of the West. As they rode toward the rising smoke of distant settlements, the canyon behind them seemed less lonely, less threatening. The wilderness had tested them, and they had faced it together, stronger and wiser for it. Najoni glanced at Jake, feeling a sense of peace she had never known. The journey had begun with suspicion and caution, but it ended with trust, respect, and a connection forged in the fires of the Wild West. The cowboy and the Apache woman had survived not just the land, but the truths of their hearts, emerging as equals, partners, and perhaps something more.